You're calling people in the state of Michigan versus Total-Leigh Wichert, 22-6806FH. Members of the jury have not returned yet. Mr. Bahani, do you wish to place something on that?
Yes, Your Honor. I think just based upon the incident in opening statements today, that the people would like to have a ruling from the court on how the defense treats the victim in this case, with particular attention to MRE 404, parents A, parents 4, with the credibility of a witness that refers to the use of rules 607, 608, and 609. Particularly 609, I think, is the most important and most relevant rule that would pertain to the defense counsel's cross-examination. But I can't see anywhere where he's going to be able to bring up whether this defendant has been in jail for anything, anywhere. And rather than having to stop in the middle of an examination of the witness or objecting during the cross-examination after the bell's already been rung in front of the jury, I would like, if the court would be so kind as to set some ground rules with particular attention to those rules of evidence.
No, I guess that's fine if the court wants to give a preliminary ruling on. The question would be, is he has obviously a conviction for leaving the scene of an accident causing death. And the question was, does that contain an element of dishonesty? I would argue that leaving the scene of an accident would contain an element of dishonesty. If the court wants to give a preliminary ruling on that, that's, I'm fine with the court saying yes or no now. And if the court tells me no, I won't get into it.
And the issue there would then fall under Rule 609, Parents A, Parents 1 and 2. Does the court has to make a determination under Parents 2, Parents B, whether the evidence has significant probative value on the issue of credibility. And further, the only issue that can be brought up is the defendant's truthfulness, not as to his assaultive character or any other particular bit of his behavior that it seemed like defense counsel was trying to aim at in his opening statement. Only truthfulness can be brought up pursuant to Rule 609.
Any other comments, Mr. Garrison?
This goes to their credibility. The purposes of attacking the credibility of a witness. Evidence of the witness has been convicted of a crime shall not be used unless evidence has been elicited from the witness or established. So if we will establish it, but I think it goes to his credibility. And
before we go any further with this, why wasn't this brought up in a motion prior to trial?
That's certainly the people's question here too. We've not received any pretrial filings, anything whatsoever from the defense. We don't even have a witness list, Your Honor.
Well, there was a witness list submitted. It just listed the prosecution's witnesses and a few other things. But Mr. Garcia,
nothing pursuant to the people's discovery order was ever produced.
I interrupted you, sir. I'm sorry.
no, I'm just, in terms of I didn't know whether or not we were going to go into it until it was kind of a decision we made this morning to go into it. After most of the voir dire seemed to be focused on, he didn't come forward because he was afraid. And so then that's why I went into the statement, because the statement tends to show he wasn't that he was afraid, it was for some other reason.
Now, Your Honor, the people purposely and constantly during our voir dire, every time we ask questions of that nature, ask them in a hypothetical manner and never, ever use facts of the current case. The people's questions during voir dire were, can you think of any reason that a witness might not want to testify? Can you think of any reason a victim might not want to testify? No specifics were ever brought forth with the facts of this particular case, as is our practice during voir dire. We do not mention the specifics of the case at bar.
So the conviction in question is leaving the scene of a personal injury accident causing death?
Correct.
That's what I have to decide. Mr. Karski, do you have any case law that indicates that it involves dishonesty?
Nothing directly on point.
I don't recall anything either. Of course, finds it's inadmissible under 609.
I'll say that.
Anything else we need to address?
Nothing from the people, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Karski, do you have anything else, sir?
Nothing further.
Let's bring in the jury. All right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Very welcome back. I hope you had a great lunch. We're continuing to the people's case in chief. Connie, you may call your name.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people call Morgan Weisenbaugh to the stand.
Weisenbaugh, would you please step up to this witness stand to my right? Before being seated, would you stop a moment, raising your right hand?
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Once seated, if you can speak loudly and clearly so everyone can hear you. Bonnie, your witness, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ma'am. Can you please state your name for the record and spell your last name for the court reporter?
Morgan Weisenbaugh, Wisenbaugh.
Ms. Weisenbaugh, I want to take you back to the 26th of February of 2022. Do you remember that day? What were you doing on that day?
I went out to the bar with a couple of my friends.
What bar?
Bottoms Up.
Is that in Bad Axe? And you said with a couple of your friends, who were you with?
Some coworkers from work.
Okay. And what happened after you got the bottoms up?
We spent our night there, and then I went to Connor Wickert's house,
And where's Connor Wickert's house?
Stanley Street.
In the city of Bad Axe. And how many people went to Mr. Wickert's house after he left the bar? Do you know?
5 of us.
Okay. And do you know Mr. Wichert?
Yes.
Okay. You see him here in the courtroom today. Can you point to him and tell me what he's wearing?
Black suit.
And where is he sitting?
In the middle.
Okay. Would the record please reflect that the witness has identified the defendant? And so, Ms. Weisenbaugh, what happened after you got back to his house?
We were all hanging out and just drinking. And then I heard a scuffle in the kitchen.
Okay. So you've been drinking that night?
Yes.
How much would you say?
Maybe like 10 to 12 drinks.
Okay. Over the course of the whole evening or after you got to the defendant's house?
Whole evening.
Okay. And so what you said, a scuffle broke out at some point that evening. Can you describe what you heard or how that came to your attention?
I was sitting in the living room out of view, so I just overheard them arguing.
So a verbal argument?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever hear anything with regard to that argument that became visible?
I mean, I heard furniture moving and that kind of thing.
Okay. Do you ultimately go into that room where this is happening? Okay. Do you ever see the defendant and Mr. Lasowski engaged in fighting?
Yeah, they came around the corner to the living room.
Okay. And what do you see at that point?
I saw the two of them on the floor wrestling.
Okay. And when you say wrestling, describe what that looks like.
I guess it was more than wrestling. They were fighting.
Okay. Describe what that looked like.
I don't recall.
Could you see any closed fists?
I don't recall.
Okay. It's fair to say you saw them on the ground together.
Yes.
Okay. And then what happens next?
It continued on for a little bit, and then Connor got up. Nate followed him. Connor went to his bedroom and grabbed the bat.
Okay. And what room was this taking place in the house?
In between the living room and the dining room, towards the hallway.
And you said that at some point Connor leaves and goes and gets a bat.
Yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Ms. Weisenbaugh, I'm showing you what's been previously admitted as People's Exhibit number 10. Do you recognize this object?
Yeah.
Is this the object that you saw the defendant recover from his room?
Yeah.
After he recovers this object, what does he do with it?
He struck.
Where did he strike him?
I don't recall all of the details, but I think it was upper body.
Okay. How many times would you say that he struck Nate with that object?
Maybe 5 to 10.
Okay. And what were you doing at that point when that was happening?
I was sitting in the living room, and then when I saw the fight, I stood up and I attempted to break it up, but I didn't get physically involved.
Okay. Did you say anything to them to try and get it to break up?
I don't recall.
Did it ultimately break up?
Yes,
How?
I don't recall.
What do you do after the fight breaks up?
I went with Nate into the bathroom and I helped him clean up his head and his injuries.
And so was he bleeding at that point?
Yes.
And you helped him tend to his injuries? Did
Sorry, I
you,
didn't get it.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
did you call 911?
I offered to and Nate declined.
Okay. And so how long are you in the bathroom with Nate tending to his injuries?
I don't recall the exact time, but I think it was a couple hours.
Okay. And at what point does he leave the bathroom?
I don't recall the exact time, but
At some point, is it fair to say he does leave the bathroom?
yes,
And what happens at that point?
maybe got in another verbal argument.
When you say they, who are you referring to?
Nate and Connor.
Okay. And this verbal argument, did it ever escalate into a physical argument that you saw?
I don't recall the details for that one.
Okay. Did the defendant, Mr. Wichert, have the bat in his hand at that time? So after this next altercation, what do you do next?
I took Nate home.
And do you see him anymore at that point, anymore that day? Or is you dropped him off and that was it?
Yep.
At any time during these altercations, did you ever see Nate with a weapon of any kind?
No, I don't.
No, you didn't see him with a weapon, or you don't recall whether you saw him with a weapon?
No, I did not see it.
Oh. Thank you, Ms. Weisbach. Nothing further at this point.
Cross-examination.
Thank you.
Good one.
Are you aware that Connor was involved in an accident previously before this incident?
Yes,
And you know the extent of his injuries from that accident?
I talked about it, but I don't know all the details.
Did you ever help him with some of those injuries?
Yes.
And what'd you do?
He had some stitches in his mouth that he had asked me to remove one time.
All right, so you have to take some of the metal pieces out of his mouth?
Mhm.
Yes. Yes. Okay. We are always recording, so. So Connor was recently healing up from an injury.
Yes,
And did he go out with you to Bottoms Up, or did he come in later?
he came in later.
All right, so when you are there, he's getting there, you know where he's coming from?
No.
Does he make a suggestion to come back to my house, or how does the conversation go to get back to this house?
I don't recall.
Okay, you know who brings it out? But you drive yourself there?
Yes,
All right, you drive with anyone?
yes,
And is that Ashley? You and Ashley drive, and then Connor and Josh drive?
I don't know.
All right, or what about Nate, you know who drove Nate?
I don't know.
All right. So at some point though, you all get back to Connor. And then is there a point where Ashley leaves? Well, how long she was there?
Maybe an hour.
Not very long. And then Jimmy leaves at some point too? And now was Jimmy Nate's ride?
I don't know.
All right, so you're not sure if Jimmy drove Nate there or not?
No,
You have any idea how Nate got there?
No.
Any idea how Nate's planning on getting home?
no.
At some point, does Josh go to bed?
I don't recall.
Are we gonna be in there though that night?
Yes,
All right, at some point, does he leave the room at least?
I don't recall.
All right, you don't know where he goes through all this?
No.
All right. But do you remember you were in the living room and at some point Nate and Connor go into the kitchen?
Yes,
Is it the kitchen or is it like that dining room area?
I wasn't able to see from where I was, so I guess it could be either.
Okay.
One of them.
You were more over to the side of the living room on one of the couches.
Yes.
Before they went to the kitchen, was there ever any talk about something that happened between Nate and Connor back in high school?
Not that I recall, but I wasn't paying attention to them.
All right, so you don't remember any type of argument back and forth or Nate accusing Connor or something?
Objection asked and answered.
In the kitchen, I heard it.
Okay, so there was a conversation that you recall in the kitchen.
Yes.
All right, do you remember what that was about? All right, but did Nate sound like he was mad when he was accusing Connor of it?
Objection, Your Honor. This witness didn't testify that anyone made accusations of anything.
I think she did, she said in the kitchen.
She stated that she overheard them arguing, but she didn't hear any accusations according to her testimony.
Right, so that's-
Testimony I heard.
So you want me to go back or do you want me to?
You want to go back to?
All right, so you heard them in the kitchen?
Yes.
All right, did you hear Nate make any accusations about something with Connor in the past?
No.
You never heard him make any accusations about Connor?
Objection asked and answered.
All right, but was Nate getting agitated or mad?
I don't remember what they were saying. I just heard yelling.
All right, and was Nate doing most of the yelling?
I don't recall.
Okay, so you heard yelling, but you don't know who was yelling?
Yeah.
Are you friends with Connor?
Yeah.
You friends with Nate?
Right.
All right, so unfortunately, you're kind of in the middle here between the two. All right, so you hear arguing, you're not sure who is arguing, but you hear the argument and then you hear furniture slamming around.
Yeah.
And did you ever get up at that point and go look?
No.
So you hear some slamming, but you stay seated in the living room? And then the wrestling leads to them coming out into the living room?
Yes.
Is one on top of the other? Are they rolling around?
I don't recall all the details. I just remember seeing them on the ground.
All right, and you said at some point Connor gets up first?
Yeah.
All right, and then Nate gets to his feet?
Yes.
And you said Connor walked towards the bedroom?
Yes.
If you know, is that where Josh would have been?
I don't know.
But Nate follows him. Do you hear Nate say anything?
Yes.
Okay. Do you hear Nate say anything to Connor?
I don't recall.
All right, and then can you see where they go into this hallway or no?
Yes.
So are they still in the hallway or do they go into the bedroom?
Connor went into the bedroom and Nate followed him.
Okay, so they go into the bedroom? And that's where this next altercation here happens?
It came back out into the hallway.
Okay. So the fighting kind of spills back out into the hallway?
Yeah.
Do you see who has the bat at that point?
Yes.
And who's that?
Connor.
All right, but they're fighting back and forth,
Yes.
and at some point, the fighting stops.
Yes.
You don't remember how it stopped?
After the bat came into play.
That's kind of what ended the fight.
Yes.
All right, and you helped Nate up into the bathroom,
Yes.
and he said you offered to call 911?
Yes.
He said no?
Yes.
Did he ever tell you why?
No.
It said at some point, did Josh come check on you two in the bathroom?
Yes.
What happened when Josh came?
They talk.
Was it friendly talking? Was Nate trying to start a fight? What was happening?
It was friendly.
Okay, so friendly between Josh and Nate.
Yes.
But when Nate comes out of the bathroom, another verbal altercation happens.
Yes.
Does that ever get physical?
Briefly.
So it gets briefly physical,
Yes.
and what ends that?
I don't recall.
But after that, that's when you were finally able to convince Nate to go home,
Yes.
and then you drove him home. Did Nate appear intoxicated to you that night?
Yes.
Did Connor appear intoxicated? You feel if Connor hadn't used the bat, Nate would have kept going after him?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
She was at the instance, she gave her opinion as to whether or not he was gonna keep looking for a fight.
Any other comments?
Objections overruled. You probably would have more after him.
Yes.
No further questions. Right.
At any time during the course of the evening, Ms. Weisenbach, did you ever see Nathan Lasowski with a weapon at any time?
No,
During the fights that you did see, the altercations, the wrestling, was anything other than fists ever used by Mr. Lasowski?
no.
Thank you, nothing further.
Status of the witness.
People would ask that the witness be excused.
No objection.
Your excuse. Thank you. Your next witness.
People call Nathan Lasowski, Your Honor.
Sir, would you please step up to this witness stand? Or B2, please raise your hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
How do you make this?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir. Can you please state your name and spell your last name for the court recorder?
Nathan Paul Lesowski, Lesoski.
Mr. Lasowski, I want to take you back to February 26th of 2022 in the evening. Where were you that night?
I was out at bowling originally and then went to Frank's and then to Mr. Connor Witowski or Connor Wicker's house.
Okay. And so you said how many people went to Connor's house?
There was 4 of us total, but I believe that was just me and Connor that drove there originally.
Okay. Had you ever met Connor before?
Yes.
Okay. And did you meet up with him at Bottoms Up then or Frank's Place?
Yeah, I didn't meet up with him. I just ran into him.
I see. And what was the atmosphere like when you were out at the bar there?
I'm fine. We were just having a good time and everything was okay.
And where is his house? So at some point you leave and you go to his house. Where is that?
I believe they're located over by the west side of town here on Stanley Street
That's in the city of Bad Axe.
in the city of Bad Axe, correct?
Brown County, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so what happened when you got to his house?
We were just drinking and hanging out and I don't know, we were just talking and we I guess we started wrestling and Connor got into a wrestling match and I lost and tapped out and then shortly after that I was getting hit in the head with a blunt object.
Let's stop there for a second. Do you remember what led up to the wrestling match?
Not really, just guys being guys at
Okay.
that point.
And you said at some point you tapped out. What does that mean?
Mutually in a fight it means that fight's over.
Okay. So is it fair to say you thought it was over?
Yes,
Okay. And then you said that you were struck with a blunt object.
right.
Did you ever see that object?
Just a piece of, I definitely knew it was something hard. It was definitely an object cylinder piece of metal is what it felt like, so.
Okay. How many times would you say you got hit?
I'd say anywhere between around 6 to 10, 5 to 10 times, so.
Okay. And so what happens after you get hit with this object 6 to 10 times?
I'm not quite sure exactly. All I knew is that I thought that I was going to work the next day and I woke up and seen what kind of shape I was in and I was not going to work after that.
So after you got hit with the object, or you said, is it fair to say you didn't have a clear recollection?
I don't have much recollection at all after I got hit, besides that I was just kind of trying to clean up.
Do you remember where it was you were trying to clean up?
Just pretty much just my clothes, and then we were sitting in the kitchen there originally, and then made our way to the bathroom.
Do you remember what room of the house you were in when the wrestling match was going on?
Kitchen or hallway that leads up from the living room.
And then do you remember what room of the house you were in when you got hit by the object?
Kitchen or hallway sitting right on the, up against the wall.
Okay. Now, after you start to get yourself cleaned up, how long would you say you're still at Connor's house?
I want to say a couple hours. They just told I got dropped off and it was daylight, so given the time, it would have been probably around 5 in the morning that I got dropped off. So
Do you remember?
probably maybe an hour, a couple hours.
Do you remember who dropped you off?
Morgan Weisenbull.
Okay. And at some point, do you go to the hospital?
Yeah, I did after I went home and I went to bed and kind of just figured that I'd wake up in the morning and just clean up what was left. And I woke up and due to the contents of blood in my pillow and the noise that I made when I touched the pillow, I did definitely decided that I needed to seek medical attention.
And you did that at McLaren Thumb ER?
Yes, sir.
And what types of injuries did you have?
I had nose, back, and top head injury.
Now, at some point, do you remember an officer from the Bad Axe Police Department speaking to you at the hospital?
Yes, Mrs. M.
And Officer Emming, do you remember her taking some pictures of you?
Yes.
Is it fair to say, well, strike that. Did she ask you questions about what had happened that night?
Yes.
Were you forthcoming with your answers?
Yes, I was trying to basically not say that anyone did it and that it was not really a big deal, but I kind of just said that, you know, basically nobody did it. It wasn't a big deal at first because I didn't want to get anyone in trouble.
Okay, but you changed your mind at some point, is that fair to say?
Yes.
And you followed up with Sergeant Anderson of the Bad Axe Police?
Correct.
And then ultimately, is it also fair to say that you had an interview with Detective Knobloch of the
Correct.
Bad Axe Police? Okay. Now, at some point, did you tell Sergeant Anderson that during this scuffle, you took the bat away from the defendant?
I never took the bat away from the defendant that I recall, but.
So if you said that, you made a mistake?
Yeah, some, I believe either, like Josh was his name or Morgan grabbed it.
Okay. Now, when you had your interview with Detective Knobloch, and then also your interview with Sergeant Anderson, were you truthful with them?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Vilsack. I don't have any other questions right now.
Members of the jury, we're going to take another quick break. If you please follow the bailiff into the jury room, not to discuss the case again, not to look up any aspect relative to the case. We'll bring you up. All right. Members of the jury have been taken back to the jury room at this point. Before cross-examination began, the court was asked for counsel to approach. Counsel did approach, And Mr. Karski, you wish to place something on the record?
Your Honor, I would like the opportunity to inquire to Mr. Wasowski the last time he's used either alcohol or a narcotic. I have some concerns based on his demeanor here today that he may have used something recently, given his physical, and I don't know if that's an agreement with me or what the reason he's not in court, but that there's enough of a concern that he's acting like he may have recently used something similar to a cocaine or a meth.
Well, you want to state on the record what you've observed so far, so the record is clear, and then you may question.
Correct, and Your Honor, it's based on my ability or my observance of him not being able to sit still. He was picking at the side of his face. He was scratching his chest. He's been blinking for more, I would say erratically, more than what a normal person would blink. It's more than nervousness to me.
Right. Mr. Bondi, do you have any comment?
Well, Your Honor, I think it's clear that Mr. Lasowski's nervous. I think it's evident that he doesn't want to be here. I think from his demeanor, I don't notice any signs of intoxication. I've also consulted with the officer in charge, and he shares that opinion. And I trust his opinion of 30+ years in law enforcement.
I'll allow you that. Without the jury question.
All right, Mr. Wasowski, when's the last time you used any type of narcotic?
As far as marijuana, yesterday,
Yesterday?
yes.
Have you ever used anything other than that?
No,
Ever used cocaine?
no,
Have you used meth?
no,
Heroin, anything
No.
like that? And no alcohol or anything today?
no.
All right. I have no further questions for that.
Do you have any questions?
Mr. Lasowski, is it fair to say that you don't want to be here today?
Yes,
Is it fair to say that you're nervous when you're on the stand and testifying?
yes.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Any other questions?
No further questions.
Bring the jury back. All right. Continues cross-examination. Karski, make this.
It's 25th. How did your day start out?
I'd probably just common breakfast and that's, just, normal day.
Did you work at all that day?
Don't recall, it was a Friday, so yes, probably more than likely, yes.
Okay, you go, what time you would have got off?
Probably about 6 o'clock.
Did you go to the bar right after, or when did you get to the bar?
No, I didn't go till the bottoms up till probably about 11 o'clock at night. Then I went bowling at around 9 o'clock.
You went to the bowling alley first?
Correct.
All right. Did you do any drinking at the bowling alley?
A little bit,
What's a little bit?
couple beers.
A couple beers at the bowling alley?
Yep.
And then you went to bottoms up?
Yep, and had a few more.
All right. How many bottoms up?
Probably three to five more, so.
Okay. And well, what time did you leave bottoms up?
Want to say it'd be after midnight, I'm not certain the exact time.
Okay. So were you there more than an hour or no?
Probably about an hour to 2 hours.
Okay, so between 12 and 1?
Correct,
All right, so at that point you had about 7 or 8 beers?
correct,
We're talking 12-ounce beers,
correct.
cans, bottles.
Probably bottles,
All right, when did you first see Connor that night?
at bottoms up,
All right, so you saw him there.
correct.
Did you approach him? Did he approach you or what happened?
I think one or the other, but we just, yeah, sat down and just started chatting.
Okay, just the two of you, or was it as part of a group?
I believe it was just me and him at the time. Might have been another friend, acquaintance or something with me, but had no relevance to it.
So when was the agreement to go back to Connor's house?
Probably right when we were leaving.
So it had been, how long was he there with you, I guess? Let me ask that way.
Time I got there, he walked in about 15 minutes after I did about,
Okay, so you were there about 15 minutes, then you decided to go back to his place?
correct.
So then after midnight that he got there,
Around midnight or after midnight, yes.
did you guys get some beers to take back to the house?
I don't think we had any beers to take back to the house, no, but Connor had some alcohol and stuff at home, he said, so we didn't take anything.
And how'd you get to Connor's house?
I rode with Connor.
Connor drove you?
Yes, I do believe, yes.
You can drive with Jimmy?
Or I might have drove with Jimmy or me, Jimmy, Connor, and Morgan all left at the same time to go over to Connor.
Okay, and then there was another gentleman there too?
Correct, Jimmy, but then he left.
Okay, was there another gentleman there named Josh?
Yes.
Okay, and then did Morgan have a friend named Ashley that came too?
Correct, but she left too.
Okay, so eventually Jimmy leaves, Ashley leaves. Do you know where Josh goes?
Josh is just in the other room.
The bedroom?
Yeah, the other room or just upstairs or,
So there's like a little hallway there. If you go down the hallway, there's the two bedrooms.
correct,
He was in one of those bedrooms?
yes.
And so it's just you, Morgan, and Connor at this point?
Yes,
All right, are you in the living room?
yes,
What are you guys doing in the living room?
talking,
Remember what we're talking about?
really, no.
You ever get into an argument with Connor?
Not really.
It's
Just
not really.
started talking and started wrestling, and like I said, that's,
Well, how do we go from talking to wrestling?
because that's what, a lot of the times when guys are drinking, they, talk and then they wrestle. And, but our friend group, not Connor, I haven't been with him for a long time and haven't hung out with him, but that's what we're bigger guys, so once in a while we drink, and that's what we do. We just wrestle, just to see who can get the best of each other, and we did, and
All right, so Connor's not part of this group. Okay, that drinks and wrestles, is that what you're telling me?
no, Connor used to be our friend back in the day, and that's just kind of what we did. That's just what us guys do.
Okay, so you and Connor have wrestled in the past.
Yeah. Yes,
And when we say wrestling, what are we talking about?
mutual wrestling.
Trying to see who can pin the other person, or trying to
Yes,
rough them up, or what? Are we doing?
Usually in wrestling, you wrestle and then winner, which pin or tap out mutually. When you tap out, fight's over.
All right, so you and Connor are aware when this starts?
In the kitchen, in the living room, standing there,
All right, and where's Morgan?
living room, kitchen, maybe standing right there.
All right, and do you grab Connor and start the wrestling match?
Can't grab him, started the wrestling match, no.
Okay, then what starts the wrestling match?
Just me and Connor just talking, and then we just started wrestling.
Talking about wrestling, or what are you talking about?
I don't recall.
So just, you're standing there and then just out of the blue decide you're gonna start wrestling with each other?
Well, clearly we're talking about something where we were talking about wrestling, and then we started wrestling, but
You talking about an old incident or an old wrestling match that happened between the two of you back in the day?
we had brought up about back when he came from the Marines, he came to a event that we had. It was just a like Halloween party or something, and Connor had came and
I'm gonna check that, that's your honor. Because the incident in question is not what Mr. Wichert is charged with. He's charged with the event that happened that night. Any other incident of combat, wrestling, fighting is not relevant to this case.
If they were talking about it and then that's what led to the decision to wrestle again, it's fairly relevant.
It's relevant. Objections overruled.
What happened back?
so we were just Connor was coming in hooting and hollering, pushing people around back, I don't know, say 8 years ago plus, and he said that I'm in the Marines and I can fight anyone, blah 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 blah. And right then when he was pushing people around, I grabbed him, put him on his back, and said that we're not going to do that here today, and if anything we were talking about that night And he said that that did not happen. And I just said that it did, and eventually we did start wrestling.
Okay, so you got into an argument over this incident. You said it happened, he said it didn't.
I wouldn't say that would started because of that. I wouldn't say it could have, but
Okay, then what started it?
not sure. Like I said, we were just wrestling around.
Okay. So eventually you start wrestling. Do you does this wrestling go into the kitchen table?
No, lasted about 10 seconds and I tapped out, and then I was sitting there, and then my next recollection was that I got hit in the head with a pipe.
All right, so you tapped out. When you say tapped out, is it one of the things, or what do you
That's-
quit, or what'd you say?
I actually did exactly what you did there, and then said that I tapped out.
And your testimony is then Connor left and you just sat there in the kitchen?
Nope,
All right, you didn't
Yes.
go walk after where he was going?
no,
You ever get up from that spot?
no,
You were in the kitchen leaning up against the wall or sitting on the
Yes.
floor?
I'm leaning up against the wall.
And then you were leaning up against the wall and he just came in and started hitting you with the bat?
Yes,
All right, what happens when he hits you with the bat?
I experienced blunt trauma to my head, and from what I know, Morgan or Josh pulled him off of me, and they tried cleaning me up and led up to me going to the hospital.
All right, so you weren't fighting him at that point?
No,
After he hits you with the bat, Morgan, you said takes you and cleans you up?
yes,
Where does that happen?
bathroom.
All right, and is that around the corner into the hallway there?
I'm not exactly sure. I don't have the blueprint of the house mapped on my head.
Okay. So she takes you in the bathroom, is cleaning you up. What happens after that? I don't know. You ever remember coming out of the bathroom and having another altercation with Connor?
Not really. I was pretty beat up bad. I don't think I realized how bad I was bleeding.
All right, and then you said you went to the hospital the next, well, it would have been later in the day.
Yeah, yes, Saturday during like around noon or 10.
The doctor said around 2 o'clock, would that have been accurate?
Yeah,
So you go to the hospital around 2. And does an officer come interview you?
I apologize. New phone.
Does an officer come? You can take a minute? No.
Not taking it. Either turn it off or mute it.
Sorry.
So an officer comes to interview at the hospital,
Yes,
they interview you in the hospital room,
correct.
you tell them what happens.
Not fully and truly, no,
All right, why not?
because I didn't want Connor to get in trouble.
Why didn't you, he assaulted you while you were just sitting against the wall, why didn't you want him to get in trouble?
Nobody really wants anybody to get in trouble and go to jail and do stuff like that.
Even though he violently assaults you with this bat, you didn't want him to go to jail for it?
Objection, that's an answer.
I don't think you should fully answer that question. You remember telling the officer that you didn't fight anyone that night, you never touched anyone?
Yes,
You just told her that someone assaulted you.
yes.
One second.
Sure.
Your testimony is you didn't say it was Connor at the beginning because you didn't want to get him in trouble. Right. It wasn't that you were afraid of him or anything like that. No. Are you afraid of Connor? No. I know.
Briefly, Your Honor.
Sure.
Mr. Lasaki, the first hit with the bat, where was that?
believe that it was in like the front of my face.
Okay,
I don't know, I got hit on the top of the head at some point, so I'm assuming that it went from the front to the top, because I went front, got hit in the tooth, and my nose got broke, and then I got the heads, and then it went straight to the lacerations on my back.
do you remember after that first hit, were you standing, sitting?
I was sitting down the whole time.
Okay, and so the subsequent hits on the rest of your body were while you were seated
Correct,
on the floor?
correct.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further.
Status of this witness.
I'd ask that this witness be excused, Your Honor.
Mr. Garcia.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. You're excused as well. Next witness, please.
Your Honor, with the admission of the testimony of Officer Guza, Dr. Remley, Detective Sergeant Knobloch, Morgan Weisenbaugh, and Nathan Lasowski, as well as the admission of peoples 1 through 10, the people rest.
Jury, we are going to take again a short recess. We will reconvene momentarily. Again, remind you not to discuss the case and not to look up any aspects relative to the case. We'll reconvene in just all right. Excused. Jury room. Please, the people have rested in this case.
Your Honor, we'd make a motion for directed verdict at this point.
All right, you may proceed.
Obviously, Judge, we believe that people have not met their burden to, especially with the issue of self-defense. As Morgan herself testified, it was clear to her that Nate kept going after him, continued to go after him, and in her opinion, he would have continued to go after him had Connor not used the bat that night. Given the nature of that, Your Honor, we ask for a directed verdict on the count of the self-defense.
Very well. Thank you.
Your Honor, the issue of self-defense can't be brought by the witnesses that have testified today, only by the defendant, because he's the only one that can testify to the state of mind. A directed verdict of acquittal is appropriate only if, considering all the evidence in the light most favorable to the prosecution, no rational trier of fact could find that the essential elements of the crime charge were proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Your Honor, the people have proven, I believe, beyond a reasonable doubt, all 3 of the elements of assault with intent to commit great bodily harm, less than murder. The issue now remaining is that of self-defense, and the only way that can come into play is if the defendant himself testifies and raises it. Therefore, Your Honor, we would ask the motion for directed verdict be respectfully denied.
Nothing further.
Thank you. For the purpose of direct verdict under MCR 6.419, the standard is simply only if considering all the evidence in the light most favorable to the non-moving party, here in this case, the prosecution, that no rational trier of fact could find that the essential element of the crime charged has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant is charged in 1 count of assault with great bodily harm, less than murder. The elements include, first, that the defendant tried to physically injure another person. Second, that at the time of the assault, the defendant had the ability to cause an injury, or at least believed he had the ability. And third, that the defendant intended to cause great bodily harm. And great bodily harm means any physical injury that could seriously harm the health or function of the body. The testimony presented so far was on that fateful day in February 26, 2022, that an altercation occurred Stanley Street in the city of Bad Axe, County of Huron. And according to the testimony first of Brianna Guza, the initial officer investigating, she was called to this matter based upon a complaint that was received at least 11 hours up to 12 hours later than when it was alleged to have occurred. She had gone to McLaren Thumb region, had an interview with the alleged victim in this case, Mr. Nathan Lasowski. Information was obtained, and during the course of her investigation, a number of photographs, peoples 1 through 9, were admitted, and the court had the opportunity to review those exhibits as well. During the interview, and was even conceded to by the alleged victim in this case, that he was not being forthright relative to who may have been the individual involved or the circumstances involved, other than he was assaulted, and then that was really essentially what was stated. We also heard the testimony of Dr. Michael Remley, who's the ER physician who was on scene at formerly Huron Medical Center, now McLaren Region. And he had testified that he had observed the following upon Mr. Lasowski: facial contusions, lacerations, back contusions, multiple contusions and lacerations, a nasal bone fracture, and regarding the injuries to the head area, a number of those injuries were stapled shut by him. He further testified that the blood alcohol level of the alleged victim was a 98, and that's whole blood versus serum. He opined that the blood alcohol level, if you are comparing it to operating while intoxicated, was just a little bit under 0.10. Detective Sergeant Kevin Knobloch testified. He stated that he had interviewed Morgan Weisenbaugh, and based upon that information, had also done further investigation. There may have been statements made from the alleged victim regarding how the incident occurred, but again, that's not very clear. Morgan Weisenbaugh testified that she was at Bottoms Up earlier in the day. They had been drinking. 5 of them had gone to the house of the defendant. She testified that she heard a scuffle in the kitchen. At that time, she had consumed approximately 10 to 12 drinks. She overheard an argument and eventually had seen them in the living room, on the living room floor, wrestling. She further testified that she saw the alleged victim struck with a bat to his upper body between 5 to 10 times. She attempted to break it up, but never got anything, never physically touched anyone, but attempted to break up the fight. She testified that she had tended to the injuries of the alleged victim, and that included and again, she didn't have anything specific, but I believe the testimony was it was a couple of hours to tend to the injuries. After the injuries were tended to, she had testified that there was another verbal argument. There was no bat for the second argument. She eventually takes the alleged victim home. She further testified that the alleged victim held no weapon at any time. But she also testified that the alleged victim followed Connor, to the defendant in this case, to the bedroom. Mr. Lasowski has testified as well. He stated earlier in the evening, earlier in the day, he may have worked that day. He's not completely certain of that. But however, there was bowling that evening. After bowling and consuming a couple of beers, that is, bowling at 9 p.m., he eventually goes to Bottoms Up or Frank's Place or Frank's Plaza at around 11 a.m., where he consumed at least 3 to 5 beers. At that time, when he entered between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m., approximately 15 minutes later, the defendant enters the bar. And they had talked for a bit, chatted, and eventually, after that, he testified that he had rode with the defendant to Connor's house, and they were talking in the kitchen area. Doesn't recall specifically what was talked about, but eventually it came up to wrestling, and he testified that there was an incident brought up in the past of the defendant being in the Marine Corps and some sort of fracas that may have occurred approximately 8 years ago. Paraphrasing his testimony, the guys will be guys, and they get into, I don't know, maybe a mutual wrestling. I'm not sure, but some sort of wrestling match between the two of them. And it lasted, according to the alleged victim, about 10 seconds because he testified he quote unquote tapped out. A short time after that, according to the testimony of Mr. Lasowski, he stated he never went after the defendant. was simply sitting, leaning against the wall, and he testified that he observed the defendant come back at him with a pipe and was struck at least 5 to 10 times. Testified that he had not much recollection after being hit. Testified that the strikes occurred in the kitchen and the hallway. Never took the bat away from the defendant. And essentially that was his testimony. Further, he testified that he didn't remember much after being in the bathroom and during the entire practice, at least regarding the allegations of that, whatever that object is, he was seated the entire time. Now, regarding the elements, comparing that to the elements of the case, clearly there is enough evidence to demonstrate, at least to the jury, a question of fact relative to the defendant trying to physically injure another person. There is evidence for that element. Second, at the time of the assault, the defendant had the ability to cause an injury, or at least believed he had the ability. According to the testimony presented, according to Mr. Wasowski, as well as Ms. Weisenbach, it appears that there's significant, or I should say, sufficient evidence to indicate that it had the ability to cause an injury. And then third, that the defendant intended to cause great bodily harm. Now, actual injury is not necessary, but if there was an injury, you may consider it as evidence in deciding whether the defendant intended to cause great bodily harm. Great bodily harm is defined as any physical injury that could seriously harm the health or function of the body. Here in this case, it's been alleged, stated by the doctor, that there was a nasal fracture and there were injuries to the head of the alleged victim in this case, warranting those injuries to be actually stated. And so there is sufficient evidence for the court to believe that there is a genuine issues material fact regarding this matter. And considering this theory of self-defense, we've not heard anything regarding that from the defendant or anyone else yet. There's been no testimony presented at this point in the people's case in chief that the defendant was acting in self-defense. There's not enough information for the court to consider at this point regarding any issues of self-defense. Bottom line is directed verdict is not appropriate and will not be granted in this case. In light of that, Mr. Garski, I always ask, do you wish to speak with your client before you wish to move forward in this case, or are you ready to proceed?
If we could have 5 minutes.
Absolutely. I always afford that opportunity. We'll reconvene at 6:00.